All right, I want to go over the development of the middle draft. And as you remember from last time, I had finished creating the early draft stage. And I don't have anything done in the middle draft stage. So I'm going to start going through it and walk you through it. Now, a big thing to keep in mind with this is that it's very important to follow step by step. And each little step is pretty dang easy. And it seems almost silly to do it. But the whole process of writing an essay is very difficult. It's overwhelming for your working memory capacity. What breaking it down into stages does is it breaks it down into little pieces, and each one of them isn't that tough. And once they all come together, you've got your essay done. So that's the goal with this. That's why it seems kind of tedious at times. And why do we got to go through these little things? This is silly. This is so easy. That's the goal, is to make this easy, but it's going to require going baby steps along the way. Okay? So again, let's review our end goal. It's to write a 6-paragraph essay that's 4 body paragraphs, an introduction and conclusion that applies the economic theory of one of the economists. And you can choose to work with any one of the economists you want to work with. Okay? And I do tell folks, generally speaking, Smith is kind of the foundational theorist for understanding economics. You can't understand anything about economics without Smith. He's the father of economics as for a darn good reason. But it's always important to know there's shortcomings in his theory. There's things he didn't account for. He didn't understand about the implosions that happened within the economy. He didn't understand why things like right now, we would have all economists talking, or most economists talking about stimulus plans. And what the heck are those? Okay. So Marx saw how economies collapse on a grand scale, and that was at the macro level. And he watched it happen again and again and again. Now, very importantly, he had a teleological theory. It went from one stage and it developed in stages until it was going to end in what he had called his utopian vision, which would be ultimately a classless society. And there are elements to that are beyond the reading we did, but that is overall how he works. But it's important to know that never really happened anywhere at all. Where we had communist governments were not first industrialized, which is what Marx thought they would first be. Industrialization would lead ultimately to its overthrow, to the working class seizing the means of production. It didn't happen that way. Instead, where we had communist governments like North Korea, China, and the Soviet Union, you had primarily, at the times of the revolution, agrarian civilizations turned into state-run situations. And it wasn't what Marx had predicted. Okay. But he saw those crises happening again and again. Now, Keynes did not say, "You're wrong, Marx." What he said is those crises, they can be addressed this way, with monetary policy. That's where the whole notion of stimulus comes from. Keynes suddenly understood how deflation and inflation worked and how they affected the entire economy across the board. You can have one industry or another go through contractions and expansions and things like that, but it doesn't affect the whole economy. That's actually a good thing. Those things happen. They self-correct. But what Keynes noticed is that when you get across the board contractions, those are deflationary. You can crash the whole system for a time, for quite some time. And that's where he saw monetary policy stepping in order to prevent money from gaining value. And that is counterintuitive. Most people think we want the value of money to go up. What Keynes said is, no, you don't, because that will trigger deflation. And then we will get unemployment, not at a 5% rate or even a 10% rate, but when it really kicks in, what happens is everybody seizes their money out of the stock market, out of investment. They do not loan it out. Essentially, they take their money, their capital, out of capitalism. So when money starts going up in value, and remember, Smith was correct that it is a commodity. When a commodity is getting more and more valuable, people hoard it. And that's what happened during the Great Depression. Everybody pulled their money out of the stock market. The stock market crashed. Suddenly, companies didn't have money to expand, to maintain, to develop, or any of that. So suddenly people were, working class people were out of jobs. And that's what Keynes understood. So at that point, to prevent deflation, and what he saw was deflation triggers that. And it's not just deflation, it's the fear that it will happen. The economy must send out, the leaders of the economy, the Federal Reserve, the presidency, and others must send out the message before it actually kicks in that we are going to pump loads of cash into the economy. In other words, we're going to make this commodity common so that its value doesn't go up. So if it's got a higher supply, its value is going to stay down. That keeping the value of the dollar down will keep people from hoarding it, will keep people putting it into the economy and basically funding a capitalist system. So Keynes noticed that the flight of capital is happening because of the fear of deflation. That's what he caught on to. And then what Friedman does, and Friedman was a Keynesian, but what he points out is that people have to get rid of the idea that corporations should act for the social good, for other people's interests. Instead, what corporations do by acting in their own interests, they're able to expand, employ more people, produce more efficiently. That is an idea straight out of Smith, but modernized and refined to understand that corporations must be moral. And Friedman is very clear that we don't want corporations selling kids, destroying, land and, polluting to a disgusting manner. We don't want unethical and immoral behavior by our corporations, but we do want them to behave in a way that is in their best interest, not in society's interest, because of the offshoot of them being self-centered is that they end up employing people and helping everybody out. So keep that in mind with Friedman. And so you pick your theory, or really you pick your situation first. You find your economist article that you want to work with. Okay, and let me go to that. You find your article, and you can pick any of the ones that I posted, and then find out which theory goes with it, and you'll be in good shape. Okay, so let me go to the early draft where I was. And this is, you saw me develop this. And I didn't know any of this stuff until I wrote it. This was applying Smith to that article, The Tearing Down the House. Today, technology is poised to upend America's property market. And you are welcome to find an article that you want to write about if it's not in my list, and if you want to go off the list, but make sure it's not a blog. In fact, if you do find an article you want to do at The Economist, send it to me, and I'm almost certainly going to approve it because I don't care what topic you write on, but it's as long as the piece is not a blog. Blogs, what they do is they apply a theory to a situation. They're doing what you need to do. So what you need is an Economist news article. Okay? So if you want to go off this list, you're welcome to. But make sure you don't get a blog and send it by me to approve it, okay? So let me go through the middle draft stage and what I'm going to do now. And here I've opened up a middle draft stage. And notice it looks much like the first version, but it's got one new element. I've got to set the context, and then I put the quotation over, and then I'm going to revise the description and revise the application of the theory, okay? So what I'm going to do right now is start to copy and paste what I've done over into the middle draft. And so this is what I've done. And so I'm going to start to copy and paste this like this. This is really boring. I'm copying this and pasting it. This is the first body paragraph. Yep. I'm moving my quotation over. And I'm just going to move all of my material from my early draft stage into my middle draft stage. And I won't make you sit through the whole time that I'm doing this, but understand that's what I'm going to do right now. That's the first step in the middle draft stage, is copy over everything you did in the early draft stage. And then we're going to rework that. We're going to add the context, and then we're going to revise all of the discussions, the descriptions, and then the analyses. So let me do that for a bit, and I'll be right back, okay? Okay, I'm back, and I've got the middle draft in pretty good shape. Not great, but it's getting there. And let me show you what I've done, okay? And you remember last time, let me click over to the early draft. I basically copied and pasted all of this stuff into the middle draft stage. That's what I did. And so in this is my first body paragraph right here, and this is the current state of it. And this was my first body paragraph before. I didn't have the context set. I had this description that was pretty dang rough, and had this analysis that was a little rough. And this is what it is now. I've set the context up. I just copied and pasted the quotation, and I then revised this, okay? And I want to show you the earlier draft and this draft. And you're going to see they're not radically different, but the second one, this middle one, is just a little bit better. So what I had before was this. This spells out the basic mechanism of supply and demand and how it works with trade. Any country that lacks a commodity, such as wine or gold, can obtain those commodities by producing other commodities that they are positioned to produce and draw in the commodities they have want of. And that was my basic idea, but you know what? It's pretty dang rough. So, but again, in the early draft stages, as I told many of you, it's okay to be rough. Just get the idea out, but don't worry, your rough draft is for you. This is how I got it in the middle draft stage. Smith's basic mechanism of supply and demand works with all markets at both the macro level and the microeconomic level. Let me hyphenate that. Any country that wants or demands a certain commodity, such as wine or gold, can obtain those commodities by producing other commodities that they are better able to produce for a price. And again, notice this isn't radically different, but I like this one better. They can then use their newfound wealth to draw in the commodities that they have want of. Okay? And then I go into how Smith emphasizes that no government really needs to get involved. So it was okay here, but it had problems. I wasn't going to worry about it. I'm going to keep moving forward. But I worried about it, and I made it better in the middle draft stage. I did the same thing with the analysis. The important word is revise. You're not going to throw it all out. You're just going to make it a little bit better. In the U.S. real estate market, there is a demand to lower the fees for the buying and selling of homes, since these fees are currently far higher than they are in most developed nations. That's how it is now. Okay, that's the middle draft. In the early draft, in the U.S. real estate market, there is a demand to lower the fees for the buying and selling of homes. These fees are currently far higher than they were in most other developed nations. Notice it's still basically the same idea, but in the middle draft stage, the sentences are just a little bit more fluid and run a little bit better. And that's a lot of what I did with the analysis on this one. I didn't radically change the core notions, the core ideas that I had as I went through it. I kind of liked what I had, and I just refined the basic ideas. I just did what I thought was necessary. And I did that in the middle draft stage, in the middle body paragraphs. I set the context, redid the quotation, and revised the description. Let me show you in the, that's the middle draft stage. And the middle draft stage for the second body paragraph, I didn't have any context. I wrote that for the first time. This obviously had some typos and other things in it, but I still kind of liked it. It's essentially the same, but notice it is a little bit longer, and it's a little bit more refined, and it's a bit better. And same thing with the analysis. I actually expanded the analysis a good deal. Here's the analysis. And again, this is the second body paragraph. Let me go to the second body paragraph in the rough draft. It's still pretty long, but what I did was revise it and improve it and clarified it. Okay? So in the second one, and notice it's a bit longer, but it just reads more clearly now. And so I did that each time and just built up bits and pieces of it. And this was the third, and same thing. I set the context up, which I had not done before, and then I revised the description and I revised the analysis. And I'm applying Smith's theory to it. What I found is that it applies really well, but it had the problem of the courts had to get involved to ensure the competitiveness of the markets, because they were basically just listing the homes with high fees. That behavior was going on in the market. What the courts did was force them to list all homes with no fees or higher fees, period. The courts had to do that. The government had to step in, and Smith did not predict that. There was a shortcoming in his theory. He was adamant about the government doesn't have to step in. This was clear that the government had to step in order to ensure the competitiveness. It doesn't mean Smith is wrong. It just means there's a little bit of a tweak in it when it comes into today's real estate market. And that's what you'll find as you go through it. Now here is the fourth body paragraph, which I did not do. Okay, so let's do this one right now. I'll set the context. The commodities of Europe were almost all new to America, and many of those in America were new to the Europe. And the new set of exchanges America and Europe new to each other, which we also see in the use of technology in the real estate market as news have been introduced. Let's get this guy out of the way. You, sit over there. Now, learn how to spell introduced. And with the context, setting the context, you're setting the context for the entire paragraph, but you really have to set up the quotation. So I'm making it clear that this is from Smith, but I do want them to know I'm going to apply Smith to today's real estate market. So and this isn't perfect. This is just a little, this now exists. It didn't exist before. And I got to learn the possessive, bingo. And then I get to the quotation. And now I want to revise this. The introduction of the European commodities. I'm just going to say European commodities. And these are the kind of things you revise. Of European commodities to America and the American commodities to Europe cause new methods of exchange to develop between the countries and within the markets. New methods of exchange to develop between the countries and within the markets. But these innovations were happening without direction from governments. Okay? The exchanges had never been thought of before and were advantageous to both America and Europe, as both were becoming more productive, increasing their demand. And again, I didn't change much of what I had already written. I just developed it more and made it apply a little bit better. It just takes a step forward. And now let's take a look at the theory, revise the application. This is exactly what was in the earlier draft stage. The infusion of so much investment and technology into the real estate market is causing the market to develop in ways that were unforeseen previously. Unlike most commodities, houses tend to vary a good deal in their condition. And since these agents and brokers often cannot see the houses themselves, because of the volume of houses they sell, they have hired researchers to work through Google Maps and have focused their energy on median-priced homes rather than outliers, which are left to more to the real estate markets. So that's the effect of it's happening. It's happening in the middle of the market, as that's where most of these brokers and real estate agents who are working with the new technology are focusing their efforts, is in the middle of the market. If your home is actually much more expensive than the homes around it or much cheaper, the brokers are going to say, man, we don't know why. Is your kitchen a disaster or something like that? We can't search that on Google. We're just going to worry about the homes that are priced in the middle. And we're going to assume everything's okay because I'm going to buy, a lot of homes. So I'm going to assume most of them are okay and then concentrate in the middle of the market, not on homes at the higher end or in the lower end of any certain market. Okay. So that's what's happening. That came from reading the article very carefully. Okay. So from reading the article carefully, that's what I've understood from the changes. And then I wrote the introduction. And now the body paragraphs are overall in good shape. The introduction I wrote 2 sentences at a time. Okay, let's take a look at the introduction. Now I went to the first body paragraph, the second body paragraph, the third body paragraph, and now the fourth I'm going to work on. What I did, and I don't follow the rules, these are general guidelines. I tried to write 2 sentences for every body paragraph. And I ended up writing 3 for the first one because I kind of set up a little bit of Smith and his background and a little bit about the housing market. And then I got into what Smith says about it and what's going on in the market. So it took me 3 for the first body paragraph. So, yeah, my thumb's happy enough. So that's what I did there. And then I wrote the second one, the effects Smith sees in markets. This only took 1 sentence. But I looked at it for a bit. I went, you know what? That Pendleton, he's going to get mad because I've only written 1. And he said to write 2. But you know what? Who cares what he says? This covers both Smith and the market. And it's okay. It's a good enough sentence. And then I went to the other one, and then I did what I was supposed to do. I wrote 2 sentences. It worked best, okay? And again, I encourage you to use your judgment. What you're trying to do is cover both Smith and the current market. And that's what I did. Here it followed the rule. I did 1, so my thumb is smiling. I did 1 sentence on Smith and 1 sentence on the market. And now let me write the introduction for the introductory sentences for the 4th body paragraph. Let me see. What's it about? It's on the newness of the market sees the on bringing about, I'm going to say unforeseen and I'm right now, I'll tell you, I'm using the word influx. I don't know why I'm using it again and again. It sounds like garbage. It really does. But you know what? I'll catch that in the last draft stage when I put this together. I'll catch that garbage writing, and I'll improve it. Okay. It's just the introduction or influence or influx of something coming into a market. With the real estate market, the influx of technology and investment Okay, so that's kind of what I've done, and I already wrote. And notice I'm using unforeseen. I'm actually misspelling it, and I used it in the paragraph. That's kind of redundant. I will clean that up in the last formatted copy. I took a stab at the thesis, and I'm okay with this thesis. But it needs to be revised. The introduction of new technology into the real estate market has followed much of Smith's theory. Notice I am applying Smith to the real estate market. Okay, there's going to be strengths and weaknesses of Keynes going into the German central bank, or Marx going into the collapse of, I don't know, some computer market or whatever. There will be strengths and weaknesses of any theory. What I'm pointing out is overall Smith works well regarding supply and demand as the market has become more productive and increased the wealth of buyers and sellers. I need to get something in there on the agents and the brokers because they've been able to be more productive. So I've got to introduce something about that. But overall, yeah, it's okay, his thesis. But has required some intervention from the courts to ensure competitiveness. And that's an aspect that Smith could not have foreseen. So that makes it my thesis. I'm applying Smith to the situation, but I'm picking up how it's working and how it's coming up short. That's how all theories in all fields work. None of them are perfect. They are all simplifications. And what this essay does is require you to write an application of a theory. So I want you to learn that from it. You're going to apply the theory. You're going to find strengths and weaknesses of any theory. All of them have them. And so this is the weakness that the courts had to step in. But it does work well. It does predict actually how things will innovate. Okay, so I will get to the final copy in a bit, but this is the middle draft stage. This is extraordinarily important, and it's important to know that you're going to go through little steps. Each little step is incredibly tedious, like watching this video. Each step is tedious. It is. But in the end, you will come away with a really well-developed essay. And I'm going to be moving this essay, what I've gotten here, in this PDF, I'm going to move it into a final copy with the next video, okay? But realize that it comes from little baby steps, one at a time, and everything will be okay.
Dr. Marvin, you can help me. Baby steps? Baby steps. Baby steps. Baby steps. Baby steps. Baby steps through the office. Baby steps out the door. It works. What?